Good morning, students of prep2 St. Joseph School. Today we're going to talk about Unit 3, Lesson 1, which is called the fossils. What are the fossils? The fossils is an old word. It means old, very old things. And for the living organisms, fossil means traces and remains of old living organisms that are preserved in the sedimentary rocks. Here we have to explain three words. What does it mean, the word trace? What does it mean, the word remain, and the sedimentary rocks? Let's start with the sedimentary rock, and it's a kind of rocks which consists of some sediments, some sands, some other rock parts. When they come each other and form some layers, they form the sedimentary rocks, and you have studied this before in Prep 1. Traces, it's the resulted from the activity of all living organism during its life. What is left by the living organism during its life, and also it may be saved or it may be preserved in the sedimentary rocks. Like what? Like the dinosaur footprint. For sure, the footprint of a dinosaur, it's done during its life. That's why it's a trace. Like the worm's tunnels. The tunnels are dug by the worms during their life. That's why we can call it trace. Number two, the remains. It's a part of a body of the living organism which is kept in the sedimentary rocks after its death, like the remains of shark's teeth, like the remains of dinosaur skull, or the remains of any part of a living organism after its death, and it's preserved also in the sedimentary rocks. Now we're going to explain what are the types of fossils. We have four types of fossils. The first type is called a complete body fossil, and I think it's clear from its name is that the whole body of the living organism is kept in the sedimentary rocks. We have two examples on this. Example number one is the mammoth, were buried in the snow avalanche which occurred in Siberia 25,000 years ago. So we can know that the whole body of the mammoth is kept in the snow 25,000 years ago. Number two, or the second example, is called the amber fossil. The amber fossil, it means we have a kind of trees, the old pine trees, it secretes a resinous matter, sticky matter. When this sticky matter or the resinous matter cover the insect, then this resinous matter solidify, it changes into something called amber. And the amber, as we can see in the picture, the amber, it keeps the body of the living organism from decomposers. Second type of fossils is called the mold. What's the mold? The mold, it's the replica, a copy of the internal details. Replica means copy of the internal details of the skeleton of once an old living organism. Like what? Like when a snail, I think you know the snail, or the clam, snails or clams, dies, it falls on the seafloor. They sink in the seafloor. And you know that the seafloor is filled up with sediments. What is the meaning of sediments? Like sand particles, like old parts of rocks, and so on. These sediments fill up the shell cavities. They fill the cavities inside the shell, and it becomes very solid as time passes. After a while, the shell itself decomposes, leaving a mold. What does it mean, the mold? A copy of the internal details of the living organism, and this copy carrying the same internal details of the snail. We have three examples on the mold: ammonite, trilobite, and the nummulites. The third type is called cast. Cast is the opposite of mold. Mold, we said that it's the replica of internal details. Cast, it's the replica of external details of the skeleton of once an old living organism. Like the cast of ferns, and ferns is a kind of plants. Fish cast. Fourth type of fossils are called the petrified fossils. الحفريات المتحجرة. They are kind of fossils in which the minerals like silica, أملاح معدنية, replace part by part of the organic material of the living organism without changing its shape. So the minerals cover the living organism from inside and from outside, leaving its shape without any change. We have three examples of petrified fossils, like dinosaurs' teeth, like dinosaurs' eggs, and like the petrified woods. And these petrified woods, we have some of them in Attamaya. Give reason. Petrified woods look like rocks, but they are fossils. They are rocks, but in the same time, we consider them as fossils. Why? Because they give us details about once an old plant. If anything give me details of the life of old living organisms, we call it fossils. Number two, naming the petrified woods in Attamaya with the Wood Mountain. In Attamaya in Egypt, we have some petrified woods and we call it the Wood Mountain. Why? Because it contains petrified woods which look like rocks. Actually, the petrification process itself, it's the process of replacing the wood material of trees by silica. Silica, I said, it's a kind of minerals to form petrified woods part by part. What's the importance of fossils? Importance of fossils, we have four importance of fossils. Number one, the age determination of sedimentary rocks, a kind of fossils we can use to determine the age of sedimentary rocks. This kind is called index fossils. The index fossil, they are fossils of the living organisms that lived in a short period of time in the past and was extinct. This kind of fossils is called index fossils. And this index fossil give us the clue or the evidence of the age of sedimentary rocks. Why? Because the age of these rocks is the same age of the index fossils existed in them. So, if we can determine the age of these index fossils, we can determine the age of sedimentary rocks. Number two, figuring out the paleo environments or to figure out the old environments. Actually, we can know that, or we can conclude the shape and the properties of old environments by knowing the fossils existed in them. For example, if you found a nummullite fossil in a place, it indicates that this area was a seafloor 35 million years ago, like the rocks of Mu'attam Mountain. If you found fern fossils in a place, it indicates that this environment is hot or was hot, rainy and tropical. If you found a coral fossils like the coral reefs, you can indicate that the environment was clear, warm, and shallow. So, by studying fossils, we can discover the old environments and their properties. Last importance is studying the life evolution, دراسة تطور الحياة. And we can know how the life evolved through something called the fossils record. If we studied the fossils record, it can show us that the life started first in the sea, then established on land. First of all, the life created in the sea, then it transformed into land. Number two, organisms evolve from simple to complicated. The living organisms, like bacteria, it's very simple. And some living organisms, like the human beings or like the animals, they are evolved living organisms. So life always evolves from the simple to the complicated. Something else, that the algae appeared before mosses and ferns, and all of them are kind of plants. The angiosperms appeared after the gymnosperms. The gymnosperms appeared first, then angiosperms appeared. And you studied both gymnosperms and angiosperms in prep 1. The invertebrates, the living organisms without a vertebral column or a backbone, as corals and mollusks with shells, they appeared before the vertebrates, the living organisms which have backbone. The first vertebrate which were created is the fish. Then amphibians, البرمائيات. Then reptiles like the snakes. And finally, the birds and mammals appeared together. The Archaeopteryx or the Archaeopteryx, it's a kind of fossils that link between the reptiles and birds. Last importance of fossils is the petroleum exploration, to discover the petrol by finding some microfossils like foraminifera and radiolaria. If we found these two microfossils in a soil, it indicates with a very high percentage that this area has petrol. And this is the end of our lesson, and see you in the next one.